Welcome to episode number 2 of trying to demystify all topics related to AI. I think one of the very timely things that I'd like to talk about, and one of the biggest challenges we face at Daisy, is change management, is the human change implications by using AI technology. I think there's just been a lot of fear created about AI replacing people, but I think there's a more detailed conversation that needs to take place. And I think we've been at Daisy living it for the last several years. And a lot of the conversation in artificial intelligence to date has been around the technology and algorithms and I think everybody, hopping on this technology bandwagon. And so I think that's been the focus of all the conversation: capabilities, technology, algorithms, labeled data, collecting data. So it's been a technology conversation, completely dominated by the technology. And then, as I know I talked about the last time, a lot of misinformation I feel about that. The technology has some incredible capabilities. I don't want to come across as saying that the technology is not interesting and has value, but I think the mischaracterizing it, I think, is not good. But a topic not talked about enough is the human impact that it will have in detail. And I think the reason we're not talking about it is that AI really hasn't hit the mainstream yet in terms of application. And I think there's a lot of early stage ideas and applications, but I think as those applications become more and more real, there's going to be this huge backlash from people. And I think, one of the first things I've seen in the news recently was this Hollywood strike now with ChatGPT and generative AI. A lot of conversation around, what if you're using my likeness or using my words? Am I going to get paid? And what if I lose my job because now the generative AI can write scripts and create video and scenery? And this is really stepping on the toes of a lot of people there. And I think that's a reaction to the change management issues that this brings up. And I think we need to work out. That's a statement that the technology is now going into practical use because it's now starting to step on the toes of people, and those people are freaking out, and rightly so. And I think that's the conversation we need to have: is how do we re-engineer the processes in any business or industry in such a way that the technology helps humanity as opposed to harms humanity and replaces people. The last thing I think we want to do is replace people. I think ultimately there will be some job loss, but I think overall, there should be more job creation. And so I think we need to talk about that. And I think so as technology gets more and more into practical application, we will get more and more reaction from the people involved. And I know at Daisy we experience this with our clients, our client users, and we speak about the users. These are human beings. If the human beings that are using our technology that we're trying to help, like, our goal is altruistic, we want to help them, but there's this fear and backlash and lack of willingness to want to use it for a variety of reasons. And I think the reasons are many, and one of the big reasons is just fear of the unknown, right? And so I think we need to talk about how the business people or the users of the technology, the human beings that will ultimately use this technology, how do we collaborate with the technology people to create the future together? I think the technology people tend to be very dystopian, and we can come up with, yeah, we can replace people and, be very black and white about it and blasé and all of that. And we don't think about it. And the technology people just release this technology out to the world without really thinking about it. And I think, the more we need to work on this change issue and figure out how to collaborate more effectively. The Daisy technology, we've kind of set it up to be seemingly a no-brainer to use, in that we're making recommendations for decisions that retailers make. So the decisions that we're replacing or augmenting or supporting, as a better word, not replacing, I think supporting people to make decisions around what are the items, specific items right at the barcode level, that you should promote every week. What are the specific items that you should not promote? Because it's that combination of items, right? I've talked about the halo effect, right? It's the combination of items that matter. Because if you promote a halo driver like ground beef and the customer thinks about making a pasta dinner, you don't have to promote the pasta, tomato sauce, bread, cheese, wine, salad fixing because the ground beef will drive those other products. So it's the mix of items. And therefore, it's also the mix of prices. What's promo price? What's regular price? And then how many items should you order to put in every store to meet the demand that you create? So these are the gory detailed decisions right at the item level, right at the barcode level. And Daisy has leading indicators. We color code which items are green, yellow, red, green being those items that generate incremental profitability, yellow being those that are neutrally profitable or make no profit, and red being those that are negatively profitable. And we do that with price points, and we do that with forecasts. So if you have a leading indicator, which we create far in advance of when you execute. So we could create this indicator at the very granular level, at the item level, for the item, the price, the order, quantity, to put in every store. We create this weeks in advance of the promo. And then after we measure the results, we measure real factual results like the sales of the item and the sales of all the other items that were in the basket. So we know the size of the transactions. So we know the items. We know which transactions had those items in it. And we know how many of those transactions occurred. So we can compare, did more items occur or more transactions occur that had our recommended items than transactions without the recommended items? So we have a comparison we can do in that week. We can say, were the transactions, were they larger? Did they have more items in them? Were they more sales dollars in the transaction that contained our recommended items versus those that didn't? Or were the green transactions more than the yellow than the red? Were the green transactions larger in sales than the yellow and the red? That's the measurement. So it's an actual factual measurement, not a made up number that anyone can validate just by looking at the receipts. And we can measure then the value created. And for our leading indicators, they're 100% accurate at the green, yellow, red level, in that green decisions are more profitable than yellow decisions, are more profitable than red decisions. So this seems like a perfect setup that if you understand that, then you should just listen to the green decisions. Like there's no thought, just use the green decisions all the time. And then maybe there are exceptions that come into play, like in the case of retail, it might be that you have a supplier like Kraft or Procter and Gamble comes and says, "Oh, I want to pay for a premium advertising slot." And you might say, okay, I want to take that money and replace one of the other items. Or there could be a supply chain issue that, shipment was late, or the manufacturing plant had an issue, or there was a storm that affected farm supply, something like that. So there'd be some exceptions around availability of product. So you could make last minute changes. But in the absence of that, if green makes more money than yellow and makes more money than red, then you should just follow green decisions, right? And so that's kind of the perfect setup. But then, you'd think that's what we thought as technologists, no brainer, like just follow the green decisions, and then have the people, the human beings who do the jobs today, have them, deal with the exceptions. And but it hasn't played out like that, right? I think there's category managers, merchants, pricing analysts, forecast, supply chain analysts that do all of these tasks today. And so, going in to replace their decision-making capability or augment it, that's where the change fear comes in. So I think it could be multifold. There could be fear of job loss, because typically this planning exercise that the Daisy software does can replace 50% of the typical task of a category manager or merchant in retail. Um, so there's this fear that if 50% of my job task is being taken away, what does that mean for me, right? So you could sense that as a human being, if you were in that situation, being empathetic, you would say, yeah, I could see that there'd be fear created that someone helping. I don't want someone to lose their job because of our technology, but I could understand that fear that could create. There's also the lack of belief. How could a technology do this? I think the lack of understanding of the capabilities of AI is a barrier that comes to play. And certainly we try to address that with education. fear of job loss is a harder one. That's something that we need to work with the executives, or that's a big change management topic, and I'll come back to that in a bit. I think another thing is the compensation. So typically in retail, there's been a category management paradigm where you manage the business by category of product. So it could be like you manage by produce or fruit or meat, and you have different category managers on each of these category, like a business. And a merchant and a human being will manage that category, and they're compensated typically on the sales or profitability of their category. And so the theory is that if everyone's category goes up, then the company of sales of or the profitability of the company goes up. But we've learned that that's not true because these categories interact. Not everything can go up. Some will go up, some will go down. And what Daisy recommends is more advertising space, more pricing investment in some areas than others. So that will create support for some categories more than others. And for the category managers or merchants or planners who we're providing more advertising space to, well, they're happy, because if you get more advertising space and more price investment, well, you're going to sell more of your products. We know that if the products are elastic, you get more advertising, more price investment, well, you're going to sell more. The category will sell more. You'll get a bigger bonus. So advertising space and price investment is very correlated to the bonus and sales of that category. Now, if we take away advertising space for some category manager, then that's going to affect their bonus because their sales will go down. And again, being empathetic, I don't want to affect somebody's bonus or ability to do their job, right? But this is the technology brings a new way of looking at the business. It's turning the categories on their side, and because we're trying to grow the whole business. So that's a big change that has to happen. Compensation has to happen, right? And so I'd say these are the major topics that we run into. And then there's just, human beings are creatures of habit. They like their daily working habits. They like their ways of working. If you've been doing a job for several years, you're in a routine, week after week, you do the same thing. You've gotten comfortable, and, again, empathetic to that. I mean, we all feel that way, that, to change that or rock the boat, is hard. Once you feel you're good at your job and you want to kind of keep in general doing the same thing. And I think, the inertia of doing the same thing is very hard to overcome. Right. So I think these are the challenges that we'll face. And we'll see this if a technology player comes in and tries to force the technology, you can imagine the backlash that will happen. Right. If someone came to you and said, this technology is going to replace your job, it'll cut your salary in half because your bonus will no longer be there, it's going to change your daily ways of working. Like, yeah, oh my God, you're going to freak out, right? I mean, I would freak out. We would all freak out. So how do you overcome this change? And we see that, I think, and probably we can look to just me personally, I've noticed on this Hollywood thing with the Chat GPT, how huge backlash and fear and anger. And I saw on the BBC News, they were interviewing IBM technology that does tennis analysis at Wimbledon, and they were talking about how it can real time measure the statistics and where the ball goes, and if it's a forehand or an error. And they're now talking about how the AI very soon will be able to do play by play commentary in real time, right? So play by play commentary of the match in real time. And then they talk to a person who does play by play commentary on the BBC radio, and she was kind of like terrified. She's going, what does this mean for me? Like, am I going to lose my job if now IBM has this technology that can do play by play? And you can see the statistics. Like when you look at tennis matches, it calculates all the statistics: how many forehands, how far did each player run in every point, how many errors, how many forehands, backhands, serve. Like it literally calculates all the stats and publishes it in real time on the internet. Like I'm a tennis fanatic, so was watching Wimbledon. You could see in real time when I didn't have time to put on TV. I was watching it on the Wimbledon app, and in real time, it was updating the statistics of every point and telling you Djokovic lost this point with a forehand forced error. Like, we didn't do that. So again, that's another example of the AI going into a place without the technologists thinking about it at all, scaring the hell out of the people, and rightly so. So, what's the answer to this? I mean, that's the conversation that we really need to be having is how do the people who do the jobs today, how can they collaborate with the technology people to define what the future looks like together in a way that's human friendly and can we find a role where the technology can help the person do the job better but doesn't just replace the person where the technology people are not thinking about technology people are just going, this is cool, this is amazing, I can look at what we can do. They're not thinking about necessarily the impact. And I think this is where we hear all this talk about regulation, and we hear talk about having the ethics and governance coming in, and the Future of Life Institute there's been letters to say we don't want to replace human jobs and all of this kind of stuff, right? So I think these are the topics that aren't talked about enough. And as a technology person, we just want to help. Like, I mean, at Daisy, our motive is to help companies be more profitable. And we know that if you help a company be more profitable, that smart companies will reinvest in price or they will invest in innovation. They won't just dividend that money out to shareholders or the owners. Some of that will happen, but they will reinvest in price because the lowest cost, the lowest price to consumers typically wins in consumers-based business. And in many businesses, price and price of the service is a major driver. So if you can be more efficient, you will be able to have lower prices, which means you will gain more market share, which means you'll be ultimately more profitable. So if you can invest in more innovation, you can be more efficient. And so this will lower the cost of goods and services. And if we do this in every industry, we will lower the cost of goods and services across the board, lower the cost of living, which will improve life for humanity. That's the altruistic motivation that we have. And so part of the lack is the fact that you really need to have a massive change management initiative where they answer these big issues, that embarking on this technology. And we thought as technologists that we could just do this with the users, but I think it's nearly an impossible task. I think we need to have a major change management initiative to kind of think through the implications and the changes to people's jobs and compensation, and figuring out how to keep the people. The last thing retailers want to do is lose their most experienced people who've been there for 25 years. Like, you don't want to lose that wisdom. You don't want to lose that. We want to capture that wisdom, and we want to figure out how to help humanity. This will occur in all industries. We're seeing that happening in the World Cup. If you recall the recent World Cup, they put a sensor in the soccer ball so that they could track where the ball was and they could track the players. And so the same thing is happening in all sports. And with this writers and creators and creative people in the movie industry, we see that with generative AI. And probably this is going to backlash from legal, and people who are writers for magazines will see similar backlash there. And so I talked a lot about the retail example. Daisy also has an insurance clients where we're helping insurance companies decide whether an incoming claim is fraudulent or not, or whether an incoming claim should be automated and straight through process with no human intervention. So can you auto pay this claim without reviewing it and looking at it? And then the fraud and the auto pay working together. And similarly, Daisy has leading indicators on the insurance side where we have a suspicion index, which indicates whether the claim is fraudulent or not, right at the level of the individual claim, and also aggregated to the level of people. So if you're in the healthcare, looking at all the claims for a particular provider, like a doctor or a nurse or a dentist or a massage therapist, we can aggregate their claims to say, is this person being suspicious? Or we can aggregate the claims to a group of people and say, is this group of people behaving suspiciously? So again, that's at the very granular level that an insurance company or a claims processor would investigate to decide, do I pay this claim? Should I investigate this provider or person? Or should I investigate this clinic or hospital? Should I investigate this group of people? Are they colluding to commit fraud? So again, we have this leading indicator right at the level of the decision. And similarly, on the payment side, we have a payment indicator that says, the daisy payment and payability index, again, right at the claim level, should I pay this claim without human intervention or not? Is this a pattern we feel very confident in that doesn't need to be looked at or adjusted at all? And we can pay that because, again, the human intervention costs money. It's expensive to have human look at it and touch it. So I think automation in the insurance industry is there. And I think in the insurance industry, it's a little bit different than retail in that insurance, there's not enough people available because the people who typically look at claims are special investigators who are highly skilled people and more expensive, and same with the adjusters who look at claims to adjust the price and review and approve a claim. So again, those are highly skilled people. And similarly, underwriters, we have a risk index. So if you're applying for insurance, is this application risky? Does it have elements of risk, or does it have elements of fraud in the application? Do the people who are similar to that applicant have a history of claims? So we can assign a risk index. And again, underwriters to look at that. We can create a price based on the risk index automatically with no human. But again, today, underwriters pretty much underwrite most of the decisions. Only the most simple decisions are let go through by a person. And so typically, insurance companies, rather than letting the computer decide, they err on the side of let's just pay the claim. We will pay it. If it's an expensive claim, we'll look at it. So I think a lot of claims get paid without looking at it because the insurance industry doesn't trust the computer yet. And again, the investigators, the way they do their job, they again don't want to necessarily be using technology to do investigations. They have a way of doing it. So now using this very analytical, investigative approach is very different. There's that change associated with that. I think on the side of investigations, there's this change management aspect. And I think also technology systems have failed in insurance, so that there's a large false positive rate. So the confidence of the investigators is very low because much of what they look at turns out to be okay. And so I think there's different change management challenges, but all very similar, that the people don't want to use the technology because they have ways of working. The lack of the company and senior management trusting the technology, so they would rather just do a cost plus or safe method without changing the processes. And if we were to release this technology and let automate more of the decisions, maybe we'd have different types of roles. So now instead of expensive adjusters, underwriters, investigators looking at claims, the technology could say, hey, some claims need a lower cost human being, an administrative person. So we could actually create new jobs by allowing them to play a different role in investigations and adjustment and underwriting, where they could do a lower cost touch and a less experience required look. And so, but again, this is process re-engineering, changing ways of working, belief in the technology, doing a very analytical approach to investigations, adjusting, payments, pricing. So same issues there, the human change management. And so I would say when we're selling the artificial intelligence technology, I'd say in my belief and the experience and looking at the challenge which we've faced for 6 years at customers, we're fighting this holy war. Even though we're trying to help and be altruistic, the resistance we get is so massive. But my sense is that for every dollar of technology cost, there's probably $3 to $5 of change management cost involved. And that would mean that we would have to have a large internal initiative that's where the executives of the company are behind, saying we are going to make these changes, and have to have some goal where there's a goal for the utilization of technology. So some percentage of the recommendations of the AI need to be followed. That's a goal, whether that's we want to get to 50% or 70%, and the executive supports that, and that's the goal. And then there needs to be a process re-engineering work done, say that how will this change the way our processes work? And that's a business process re-engineering, typically done by change management consulting firms or strategy consulting firms. Then there's a compensation. How does the process and the job roles change? And when the job roles change, how do we change compensation? So these are large large projects, large initiatives that need to be taken. And if we don't undertake those changes, I think the technology projects will fail. And we've had this experience in the past. I think the reason that the change is exacerbated here more than usual is that we're running into decision making that affects revenue. Um, and when we're doing merchandise planning in retail, it's arguably the most important process in retail that affects the profitability of retail. The weekly sequence of what items, what prices, what orders to make, how much inventory to allocate. This affects the profitability of retail. Deciding what price to charge on policies, whether you should pay a policy or not, whether you should investigate it as fraud or not. These are fundamental decisions which affect profitability. So it's the fact that the AI technology is touching on fundamental decisions that affect profitability, which is why this is different than other technology changes and even more difficult. The same challenges existed with other types of technologies, maybe automating accounting or automating kind of uh, early computing, like the NASA ladies. If you saw that, who used to do orbital calculations by hand calculator. When we replaced those, nobody lost too much sleep over that because we weren't going at the core of middle management, or we didn't lose our mind when we replaced accounting departments where people used to do double entry ledger bookkeeping and adding machines by hand. We all replaced that by accounting software. And this is where I think the human beings who do the jobs today need to step forward. Otherwise, draconian things could happen. Because if you sit back and ask yourself, 10 years from now, will the processes that we run today look like the processes that we run today? I would argue to say any person with common sense would say absolutely not. Given the pace of change and AI technology and the hype about it every day in the media, like literally, I don't know what percentage, and every time I turn the news on, like half the news is about AI this and AI that. So we got to believe that the processes will be very different 10 years from today. And if you want to take the technology dystopian view and one day, a large three-letter tech company shows up and your whole department will be wiped out and business process outsourced and 100 technology people will come in and replace the 1,000 humans who do the job today. That's one scenario that could very well happen. And it's happened in the past with accounting departments, computing departments, other jobs. Or the users who use the technology today could step forward and say, this is what we, and the executives who are in these companies, this is what we want the future to look like. We want to employ people. We value our people. We want to elevate them, give them more strategic roles. The decisions that the computers make are very repetitive, rote, granular. People are not good at these decisions. Daisy's mission is to elevate people. So let's define what is that elevated role? What is the new process? What is the new compensation? What is the new job role? And let's have this conversation together. As a technologist, I don't know exactly what it can look like. I could take the dystopian view and say, if you listen to 100% of my green decisions, you will make more money. I don't need any human beings at all. Just do green decisions. That's what the technologist will say. The empathetic side of me says, I want to have no business of replacing human beings. I don't want to do that. So please work with me so we can figure it out together. But don't fight with me, because if I lose, that's fine. But tomorrow, another technology company will show up, and the exact same thing will happen. It's a bridge that needs to be crossed by everybody. And my prediction for the future is that we will hear more and more and more backlash on the news, like the Hollywood creatives, like the sports reporter, like my clients. When it goes out to more and more industries, we'll see more and more of that start to happen. So I hope this is a topic that we can raise awareness on, and that we can all have more intelligent conversations about how to mutually bring this technology to the forefront without affecting humanity in anything but a positive way. That's it for today. Hopefully, to stimulate some thoughts. And hopefully, if you have any questions or follow up, please reach out and, answer them in the next podcast. Thanks so much.